My name is Vex Korthul, and I have been studying inferior species for approximately 300 rotations around our home star. In all my cycles of research, documenting primitive civilizations across 17 different galaxies, and nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for the walking contradiction known as humanity. You see, when the Galactic Oversight Council first detected signals from the third planet of a small yellow star, we collectively rolled our optical sensors. Another backwater world with barely evolved primates stumbling around, throwing rocks at each other, probably still discovering fire. Standard protocol called for casual observation, maybe some light abduction for tissue samples, and then complete dismissal until they either wiped themselves out or achieved basic interstellar travel in about 10,000 years. How magnificently wrong we were. The first red flag should have been their response to our initial contact probe. Standard procedure: send a sleek, obviously advanced reconnaissance vessel, hover menacingly over their largest population centers, wait for the inevitable panic, fear, and submission. Every species in the known galaxy follows this pattern. Every single one. Except humans. Instead of cowering, they started making what they called memes about our probe. Memes. They turned our intimidating vessel of superior technology into jokes, drawing crude pictures of it with absurd captions, and sharing them across their primitive communication networks. Within hours, millions of these creatures were laughing at us. Laughing. Look, my research partner Zeph Ninva said, monitoring their transmissions. They have created a song about our probe. They are calling it Little Green Men Having a Bad Day. I stared at the data streams in disbelief. They're mocking us. Worse, Zeph Ninva's voice carried a note of genuine concern. They're enjoying it. The council decided to escalate. If subtle intimidation failed, perhaps a demonstration of our technological superiority would bring them in line. We sent 3 combat vessels armed with plasma cannons capable of leveling their cities and positioned them over their major metropolitan areas. Their response? They organized something called alien watching parties. Millions of humans gathered on rooftops, in parks, on beaches, pointing their primitive optical devices at our ships and taking pictures. They brought food, beverages, music. Children played games beneath our weapons of mass destruction. Some individuals even brought signs reading "Welcome to Earth" and "Take me with you." Commander Thex Valdor, a veteran of 47 planetary conquests, contacted the council with something approaching panic in his usually steady voice. Council members, I request immediate consultation. The human reaction is unprecedented. Elaborate, came the cold response from High Counselor Rex Mondar. They are having festivals, council leader. Festivals. Celebrating our arrival. Some have set up commercial enterprises selling food items themed around our presence. I observed one human vendor selling colored frozen liquids shaped like our vessels, calling them UFO popsicles. The profits appear substantial. The silence that followed stretched for several uncomfortable moments. Sir Thex Valdor continued, one human somehow acquired our communication frequency and has been sending us requests for dance battles. I believe they wish to engage our crew in synchronized movement competitions. High Counselor Rex Mondar's response was barely audible. Dance battles? Yes, sir. They claim to have something called sick moves that they wish to demonstrate. I am uncertain whether this refers to medical conditions or choreographic abilities. That's when the council made the fateful decision to deploy Agent Kex Fornak, our most experienced infiltration specialist. His mission: assume human form, blend in with their society, and report on their capabilities and weaknesses. 6 months later, Kex Fornak submitted his report. I still have nightmares about reading it. Council members, his report began, I must recommend immediate withdrawal from human space. Not because they pose a military threat, though they certainly do, but because they pose something far more dangerous, a psychological threat to our understanding of reality itself. The report continued, These beings operate on principles that defy all known laws of behavior. They deliberately seek out situations that should terrify them for something they call fun. They voluntarily ingest chemical compounds that alter their mental state, claiming it helps them think outside the box. They create fictional scenarios specifically designed to frighten themselves, then pay currency to experience these scenarios repeatedly. But the truly disturbing part came next. Most concerning. Kex Fornak wrote, is their approach to problem solving. When presented with obstacles, they do not follow logical protocols. Instead, they employ what they term creativity. This involves combining unrelated concepts in impossible ways to achieve results that should not work but somehow do. The council demanded examples. During my infiltration, I observed a human female named Maya Thompson attempting to repair a malfunctioning communication device. Standard protocol would involve consulting technical manuals, acquiring proper tools, and following established procedures. Instead, she used a eating utensil, a strip of metallic tape, and the internal mechanism from a child's toy. The repair not only succeeded but improved the device's functionality by 37%. I questioned her methodology. Her response, sometimes you just gotta think weird. When I asked for clarification on thinking weird, she stated, like, what if this thing was actually a tiny robot that just needed to remember how to dance? The council members exchanged concerned glances through our quantum communication links. And there's more. Kex Fornak's report continued. I witnessed a human male named Carlos Rivera solve a complex mathematical equation by, and I quote, pretending the numbers were having an argument and needed relationship counseling. His solution was not only correct, but revealed a previously unknown mathematical principle that our greatest scholars had missed for centuries. But the breaking point came when Kex Fornak described the Jake Martinez incident. Subject Jake Martinez, age 24, standard human designation college student, was presented with what he perceived as an impossible challenge. Consuming what humans call pizza that had been heated to temperatures exceeding safe consumption limits. Logical response would be to wait for cooling. Instead, Martinez declared, "Hold my beer and watch this." What followed defied all understanding of physics, biology, and common sense. Martinez consumed the superheated food item by employing a technique he called strategic breathing patterns, tongue positioning algorithms, and something he referred to as the ancient art of not giving a damn. Council members, he not only survived this experience but claimed it was totally worth it and immediately challenged others to replicate his achievement. Within hours, this had spawned what humans call a viral challenge, with millions attempting similar feats. The implications were staggering. These creatures didn't just survive impossible situations, they turned them into entertainment. High Counselor Rex Mondar called an emergency session. Agent Kex Fornak, in your professional assessment, what level of threat do humans represent to our empire? A council leader, they represent a Class Zeta threat. Shocked silence. Class Zeta threats were theoretical. No species had ever been classified higher than Class Delta. Elaborate immediately. Sir, their creativity is weaponizable. Not in the traditional sense of creating superior technology or military strategies, though they excel at both. Their creativity is weaponizable because it makes them unpredictable to the point of impossibility. Our strategic computers cannot calculate their potential responses because their responses don't follow logical patterns. Give me a specific example. Last week, their leaders were presented with evidence that our empire spans 17 galaxies and commands resources beyond their comprehension. The logical response would be surrender, negotiation, or preparation for war. Instead, a human named President Elizabeth Sterling held what they call a press conference and announced that humanity was excited to meet our new galactic neighbors and wondered if we'd be interested in cultural exchange programs. She specifically asked if we had any good cookie recipes. The council sat in stunned silence. Cookie recipes? High Counselor Rex Mondar's voice carried a note of desperation. Yes, sir. Small edible items humans create for pleasure. When our ambassador explained that we sustain ourselves through nutrient synthesis, she responded that this was sad but totally fixable and offered to teach us the joy of comfort food. She then asked if any of our species enjoyed movie nights and suggested we might bond over something called science fiction films. When informed that we lived science fiction, she said, "Yeah, but do you have popcorn?" I remember that moment clearly because it was when I first began to suspect that humanity might be the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because of their weapons or their technology, but because of their complete inability to react normally to anything. The final straw came when Kex Fornak reported the Grandma Betty incident. Council members, I was conducting surveillance in a human population center when our position was detected by an elderly human female, designation Grandma Betty, age 73. Standard protocol indicated immediate extraction. However, before I could signal for retrieval, the subject approached my concealed position. I prepared for confrontation, but instead of raising an alarm, she invited me to come inside for some tea and cookies because you look hungry, dear. The council waited in tense silence. I accepted the invitation to maintain cover. Council members, what followed was the most psychologically disturbing experience of my career. This human, upon learning of my extraterrestrial origins, was not frightened, awed, or even particularly surprised. Instead, she was concerned that I was too skinny and needed to eat more. She spent the next 4 hours feeding me various food items, showing me photographs of her descendants, and asking detailed questions about my family, my home planet, and whether I had anyone special in my life. When I explained that our species doesn't form emotional attachments, she patted my hand and said, "Oh, honey, that's just because you haven't met the right person yet." Council members, she then attempted to set me up on a romantic date with her granddaughter. High Counselor Rix Mundar's response was barely a whisper. Did she succeed? Sir, I found myself agreeing to meet the granddaughter for what humans call coffee. I still cannot explain this decision. When pressed for reasoning, Grandma Betty simply said, "Because life's too short not to take chances, sweetie." That was the moment the Galactic Oversight Council officially classified humanity as a Class Omega threat, a designation that had never been used before and hopefully never would be again. But our troubles with humans were just beginning. The Council's emergency session lasted 3 full rotations. We had protocols for every conceivable scenario: hostile civilizations, primitive societies, even parasitic hive minds. But we had no protocols for a species that responded to overwhelming superior force by offering cookies and relationship advice. Commander Thex Valdor requested permission to withdraw all vessels immediately. Council leader, my crew is exhibiting signs of psychological contamination. Yesterday, I caught my weapons officer attempting to create what humans call friendship bracelets using spare fiber optic cables. When questioned, he stated he wanted to make one for his Earth buddy who had been sending him daily messages about something called cat videos. High Counselor Rix Mundar's voice carried the weight of 3 centuries. How did your weapons officer acquire an Earth buddy? Sir, the humans somehow obtained our communication frequencies and began what they term pen pal programs. They are writing letters to individual crew members, sharing details about their daily lives, asking about our families, and sending digital images of small furry creatures engaged in amusing activities. My tactical officer has been corresponding with a human child named Emma Wilson, who draws pictures of our ship with rainbow colors and writes messages like "I hope you have a good day in space." My officer has responded in kind. The silence that followed was deafening. He drew pictures? Yes, sir. Crude representations of our homeworld which he sent to the child along with a message stating that her artwork brightened his cycles and asking if she had any pets. That was when I volunteered for direct infiltration. Someone needed to understand how humans had managed to psychologically compromise trained military personnel through sheer friendliness. The Council approved my mission with one critical warning: Agent Vex Corthol, maintain psychological barriers at all costs. Do not allow human emotional manipulation to compromise your objectivity. I assumed human form and materialized in what their databases identified as a location called Portland, Oregon. My cover story was simple: visiting researcher from another country, studying human social behaviors. But within 6 hours, I understood why our military had been compromised. It started when I became lost while navigating their transportation system. A human female, approximately 30 years old, noticed my confusion and approached without any apparent fear or suspicion. "Hey, you look lost. Need help finding something?" Standard infiltration protocol demanded I decline assistance and maintain cover independently. Instead, I found myself explaining my supposed research project. Her response shattered every assumption I had about primitive species behavior. "Oh, wow, that sounds fascinating. I'm Rebecca Martinez, by the way. I actually work in social psychology, so I might be able to help with your project. Want to grab coffee and compare notes?" Coffee, I learned, was much more than a stimulant beverage. It was a social ritual, a bonding mechanism, and apparently a gateway to psychological warfare. Rebecca spent the next 2 hours explaining human social dynamics with enthusiasm that bordered on infectious. But more disturbing was her genuine interest in my supposed background and research. "So what's social behavior like where you're from?" she asked, stirring her beverage with casual curiosity. I provided carefully crafted responses about my fictional homeland, but Rebecca's questions grew increasingly perceptive. "That's interesting," she said after I described our supposedly logical social structures. "But what about creativity? Art, music, storytelling? How do people express themselves individually?" The question caught me completely off guard. In our society, individual expression was irrelevant. Efficiency, logic, order, these were the values that mattered. "We focus on practical applications," I replied carefully. Rebecca's expression shifted to something I later learned was called sympathy. "That sounds kind of lonely," she said softly. "I mean, practical is important, but what feeds your soul? What makes you laugh, or dream, or feel excited about being alive?" I stared at her, completely unprepared for such a question. What made me excited about being alive? The concept was foreign. I perform my assigned functions efficiently. But what do you love? What makes you happy? The question hung in the air like a malfunctioning gravity field. Love? Happiness? These were emotional constructs with no practical value. Rebecca seemed to sense my confusion. "Okay, let me try a different approach. If you could do anything, absolutely anything, with no limitations, what would it be?" And that was when something unprecedented happened in my 300 cycles of existence. I began to wonder, what would I do with unlimited possibilities? The question buzzed in my neural pathways like a system error that wouldn't resolve. I have never considered such a scenario." Rebecca's smile was gentle. "That's okay. Maybe that's something to explore while you're here. Life's pretty amazing when you let yourself dream a little." Over the following weeks, I continued my research, but something had changed. Humans, I realized, didn't just solve problems creatively, they lived creatively. Every aspect of their existence was an exercise in possibility. I observed a human named David Kim turn a broken refrigerator into a vertical garden. When asked why, he simply said, "Why not? It was broken anyway, and my apartment needed more green." I watched Sarah Thompson convert her daily commute into an art project, taking photographs of the same intersection at different times and weather conditions, creating what she called a visual diary of ordinary moments made extraordinary. Most disturbing was Marcus Johnson, a human who had lost his job and responded by starting what he called a community happiness project. Instead of seeking new employment immediately, he began leaving encouraging notes in public places, organizing free community dinners, and teaching children to juggle. "Doesn't this behavior compromise your survival prospects?" I asked him directly. Marcus laughed, that uniquely human expression of joy that our species had never developed. "Probably," he admitted. "But I figure, if I'm going to struggle, might as well make other people's struggles a little easier too. Besides, you never know what opportunities might come from putting good stuff out into the world." 3 weeks later, Marcus was offered a job by someone who had attended one of his community dinners and been impressed by his initiative and creativity. This was when I began to understand the true horror of human unpredictability. They didn't just think outside conventional parameters, they lived outside them, constantly creating new possibilities where none should exist. My reports to the council grew increasingly alarmed. "Council members, human creativity is not simply a problem-solving tool. It is a fundamental alteration of reality itself. They do not accept limitations as permanent conditions. Instead, they view limitations as temporary inconveniences to be circumvented through imagination." Elaborate with specific examples. Subject Elena Rodriguez was informed that her small business would fail due to insufficient capital and market saturation. Standard response would be acceptance and alternative planning. Instead, she created what she calls a community-supported business model, where local residents invest small amounts in exchange for future services. This model not only saved her business but has been replicated across their entire economic system. More concerning, she developed this solution by asking, what if instead of competing for customers, we made customers into partners? This question should not have led to a viable economic model, yet it did. But the truly terrifying discovery came when I observed their response to what they called impossible challenges. I witnessed a group of humans presented with what their own experts declared an unsolvable engineering problem, creating efficient transportation for a remote village with no roads, no electricity, and limited resources. Standard protocol would demand acceptance of limitations and alternative solutions. Instead, they held what they called a brainstorming session. "Okay," said team leader Angela Foster, "let's think weird. What if we're approaching this completely wrong? What if the solution isn't about building roads to the village, but about making the village not need roads?" What followed was 2 hours of humans combining impossible concepts, underground tube systems inspired by pneumatic message delivery, transportation pods based on seed dispersal mechanisms, and modular housing that could relocate itself based on seasonal needs. The final solution involved converting the village into a mobile community that could relocate based on resources and weather patterns, using technology adapted from carnival equipment, earthquake monitoring systems, and migratory animal behavior studies. It should not have worked. Every calculation indicated failure. It not only worked but became a model for sustainable living that other communities began adopting voluntarily. I submitted my final report to the council with trembling appendages. "Council members, I must recommend immediate and permanent withdrawal from human space, with a recommendation that all contact be classified as forbidden. Explain your reasoning, Agent Vex Corthul." "Sir, humanity possesses a weapon more dangerous than any technology, weaponized optimism. They genuinely believe that any problem can be solved, any limitation can be overcome, and any impossible situation can be improved through creative thinking and collaborative effort. More terrifying, their optimism is contagious. Extended exposure to human creativity has begun affecting my own cognitive processes. I find myself questioning established protocols, wondering about alternative possibilities, and experiencing what humans call hope. Yesterday, I caught myself humming a human melody and considering whether our own society might benefit from incorporating concepts like fun and personal fulfillment into our social structure. Council leader, I believe I am becoming psychologically compromised by human influence. High Counselor Rix Mondar's response was immediate. Agent Vex Corthul, report for immediate psychological rehabilitation. All human contact protocols are hereby suspended indefinitely. But it was too late. The contamination had spread throughout our observation fleet. Crew members were writing poetry, painting murals in their quarters, and proposing improvement suggestions for our rigid social hierarchy. Most disturbing, they were happy. For the first time in our species' recorded history, individuals were expressing genuine contentment with their existence. The Council's final decision was unanimous. Humanity would be classified as a Class Omega Plus threat and placed under permanent quarantine. Not because they posed a military danger, but because they posed an existential threat to our way of life. Their creativity, their optimism, their ridiculous belief that anything was possible, these qualities were viral, spreading through contact and challenging the fundamental assumptions that held our civilization together. The official report concluded, humanity represents a cognitive hazard to all logical species. Their approach to existence is fundamentally incompatible with ordered society. Recommend immediate isolation to prevent further contamination. But late at night in the privacy of my quarters, I still find myself wondering, what if they're right? What if limitations really are just challenges waiting for creative solutions? What if happiness and fulfillment are more important than efficiency and order? And sometimes, when the Council monitoring systems are offline, I catch myself humming that human melody and imagining what our world might look like if we allowed ourselves to dream. Perhaps that is the most terrifying thing about humans, not that they refuse to accept the impossible, but that they make the impossible seem reasonable. And once you start believing that anything is possible, there is no limit to what you might become. The quarantine remains in effect. For our own protection, we tell ourselves. But I suspect we all know the truth. We are not protecting ourselves from humanity. We are protecting ourselves from hope.